Today, I'll be interviewing Michelle Hackman with the Wall Street Journal. She's a well-known immigration reporter who studied at Yale, was a writer for the Yale Daily News, and now has worked for Wall Street Journal for almost 10 years. She has such an interesting history. She was born with a congenital condition that we'll talk about, and it will blow your mind with the grace with which she navigates the world and her job given this condition that she's dealt with since birth. We're going to talk about some of the most pivotal pieces she's written on immigration, and one particular one that went viral for all the right reasons. And of course, we're going to talk about immigration policy itself. Let's dive right in on this week's episode of Inside Thoughts Out Loud. Welcome, Michelle Hackman, to Inside Thoughts Out Loud. I am so excited to have you here. I have to start this conversation by first going over just what a remarkable human being you are. So I want you to walk me through your time at Yale and how you ended up with the Wall Street Journal, and then specifically doing pieces on immigration.
I was very lucky to be able to go to Yale. I always knew that I wanted to be a journalist, even in high school. I wrote for my high school paper. I more than even writing for my high school paper, I think I just had this aspiration of I had these images of myself covering presidential campaigns and doing what you see reporters do on TV. And I don't know if it was Gilmore Girls or what it was, but I was like, I have to go write for the Yale Daily News.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. I mean, I'm sure it would have been fine had this not worked out. It's amazing that it did. I feel like I almost willed it into being. So I joined as soon as I got there.
And what was your major at Yale?
Political science.
Love that. Okay.
Yes. I maybe should have majored in something different, but we could go back to that.
We're going to, because I have an aspiring reporter, journalist, young gentleman that's in my carpool that is obsessed with your work. And so we're going to get there. But yeah, go ahead.
But when you say what did I major in? I mean, I think probably the honest answer, and I've heard other people say this too, is I majored in the college newspaper. It's definitely where I spent the most time. Wherever I could, especially the later years of college, instead of writing normal papers, I would try to write in the style of magazine articles so that I could reuse them and maybe publish them. I did that a few times. But I started there. I covered all sorts of stuff. My second year, they gave out beats. And so I was covering sort of city and state politics in New Haven and Connecticut. And then I ended up editing that section of the newspaper and just started doing internships all over, one in Pittsburgh. And then I got connected with the Wall Street Journal, which is how I eventually ended up back there full time.
And you've said all of this, and I purposefully didn't lead with this because I wanted you to tell us all of this and then tell our listeners, for those who may not know, you are blind.
That's right.
How has that looked for you navigating being a part of the Yale Daily News and then going into reporting and working for Wall Street Journal?
There, I guess there was not a lot of precedent for what I did. And
yeah.
I didn't
Do you
think
know how
about it that
remarkable
way.
you are? I mean, that's why you're so humble. I'm like, do you know how amazing you are?
Thank you. So I was born with a condition where basically I was born with a non-functional left eye. And when I was 8, my right eye was somewhat affected too, and my retina detached when I was 8. And so they weren't able to fix it. I lost all the vision in my right eye too. And I don't know, in retrospect, it's if you have to go blind, which I'm not necessarily here saying that I recommend it, but if it were to happen to you, I think it was a great time. It was the best possible time. I was old enough that I kind of knew what things looked like. I remember colors, for example. I have an idea of, I have a really good visual, a spatial memory. I know what some people's faces look like. But at the same time, I was young enough, when you're a really little kid, you can adapt to anything. It's not like you're so old that you're mourning what you could no longer do. I think your brain is so malleable that you grow. Right. And I got all these services through school. I was in a public school, but a really, really good one, where they taught me Braille and they gave me these things called mobility lessons. And I remember specifically at age 15, I think I also was just I had this, I probably like an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. Like I didn't have enough fear.
Which is another great thing about kids in general.
Yeah, totally. I have this vivid memory of going with the mobility instructor, and they were like, okay, like we're gonna take the subway. And it's not like I knew anything about the subway. But they were like, if you get lost, just like, they would walk maybe like 50 feet behind me. So like not close enough that I could turn and be like, where am I? What am I doing? So we went into the city. They sort of trailed me, but they were like, if you get lost or like you don't know where you are, you need to just find for a stranger and ask for directions, and you'll find that people help you. And I remember this because I was there with one other person who was like really timid about, stopping strangers and asking for help. But I was like, whatever, this is what I got to do.
Yeah.
I really want to get from point A to point B.
Right.
And I think maybe like a lack of fear and a lack of shame. That's weirdly come in very handy with my journalism.
Yeah. I just think, I mean, your take on it is so refreshing. And I also want to talk about it in the context of obviously current events and watching, I think, a lot of young people navigate the world that come in with a variety of skill sets, right? And to me, I've always believed in the diversity bonus before it became a term that was keyed, right? I truly believe that diversity is not just for inclusivity or to make somebody feel better. Diversity is literally the way we're going to be better at everything. And to see someone who is incredibly successful in their career, but has what many look at as a difficult disability that they otherwise would have struggled to get beyond, you're such an incredible example of how if we have such programs, if we give people the space to ask questions, have no shame, you know what I mean, all the things that you said, then you create these adults who give back to the world in such meaningful ways. Do you feel, since you were that 8-year-old girl, do you feel like we've gotten better or worse at doing whatever is necessary to help people who have variable abilities reach their highest potential?
It's hard for me to say because I'm just me, but I feel like I do have this optimism that, it's like the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. What's that famous phrase? Yeah. I do feel like we've gotten better. We've had more people in positions, with various backgrounds and disabilities. And I just found that, like, maybe people at the Wall Street Journal, when I got hired, like, blanked or had questions, but no one shared them with me, which I find so remarkable. Like, no point did any editor stop me and say, like, is that something you can really do? Or, I think, it probably helps that I was sort of entry level. And so they were able to give me like fairly basic stuff to begin with. But, they really treated me like anyone else, which I really appreciated. And I think, over time, it's funny. I feel like I've been more on the receiving end of learning from diversity than on the giving end. But I really hope that I've been able to give to colleagues too and sort of teach them various skills. I think one example that comes to mind is early on, one of my coworkers, he was like, when you go on a reporting trip and you have to describe a scene, how do you do that? Like, he was like, I don't get it. You can't like look around. And I was like, I don't know. I just treat it like a reporting question. I just ask people around me, like, what does this room look like? How would you describe the furniture? How would you describe what this person's wearing? And he was like, wow, I'd never even thought to do that.
But see, that's what I'm talking about. The diversity bonus is you are now reporting from such a unique capacity and angle that other people who would use their eyes, but then of course comes your own unconscious bias, right? So how you would describe something versus how others. And most would argue that data gathering the opinions of multiple people versus simply describing what you see, the former is actually potentially, quote, better reporting, right? And that would be, I would think, a bonus or an improved way of reporting that a lot of people maybe don't do because they do rely on their own eyesight. And
that's
something that we probably don't even think about. Again, you don't, all of us obviously walk through life with our own biases, and that's normal because we lead our lives and we have our unique experiences, and then we have shared experiences. But I bet it, like your colleague who asked this question, I bet it blew their mind. Oh my gosh, like I think you were about to say it. I never thought to do that. I just described what I see. I know you continue to have a great experience at the Wall Street Journal. Can you think of a time where you didn't, or where you felt that you weren't maybe granted the benefit of the doubt or the ability to have the same success as a colleague because of the blindness? And if you have one of those stories, just I'd love to hear about how you navigated.
There are things like, I don't know if this is necessarily at the hands of anyone else, but I feel like I definitely grew up with this attitude of like, I don't know how I'm going to pull this off, but I want to, so I'm going to figure out a way. Mm-hmm. And that's like really, really behooved me in a lot of ways. Like,
who do you credit that to?
I have no idea.
Yourself, your parenting, a teacher, the neighborhood you grew up in. And you're allowed to say myself. Just I was born a baddie.
Probably all of those things. But yeah. I do like, I had parents who definitely like were always like shook by some of the ideas I'd come up with that I'd want to do, but would say yes to them. They're very permissive. They, were very, very into education and into making sure that I had all the sort of tools that I needed to be a functional adult. So I like definitely credit my parents. I had this amazing teacher in high school who also, trying to think what to even say about him.
Can we get a name?
Yeah, his name was Mr. Shorn. He was my high school science teacher. I worked on a big science, like a big research project with him through a lot of high school. So we spent a lot of one-on-one time together. And he was really into the idea of me growing up being a reporter. And he never, I don't know. He thought it was like really, I think he thought it was well suited to like my interest in politics and my, I liked to talk to people and I liked to figure things out. And I just remember, this is so apropos of nothing. I remember one time he was talking to me and he was like, if you're going to go be a journalist and be traveling the world all the time, like you need to find a spouse maybe with a more stable job. And I was like, that's hilarious that you're giving a high schooler that advice.
Yeah.
But I think it was two things. It was like, one, a really good life advice, but two was like, oh, I'm going to be traveling the world. And like, he sees that. And I want to do that too. And I don't know how that's going to happen, but I'll figure it out.
As someone who also grew up very confident to the degree of delusion, I mean, I continue to be one of those delusional people. It was a little delusional,
right?
Yeah. But it has also served me well. However I choose to reinvent myself, whatever goals I set, I simply will figure it out along the way. But I credit my parents a lot because they fed into the delusion. They were also saying things like, well, when you're that big bad plastic surgeon that you want to be, think about X, Y, and Z, right? And when you hear that as a child and somebody that you respect, that you trust, believes in you, and they say it with such ease and comfort, I mean, what an incredible blessing that is. And I'm repeating it out loud because I do get on my Instagram page a lot of questions about parenting and a lot of questions about how do we raise somebody who's going to be self-confident and go after their dreams. And I think my greatest advice to them is you always have to, you can't just say you can be whatever you want to be. You have to help them visualize what that world is going to be like for them because even in high school or as a young child, when you hear an adult that you respect echo your dreams in reality, I think that's incredibly powerful.
The thing I was going to say is like, I come in with that attitude and I think one of the things that's been like a little challenging for me is sort of going into spaces where I'm like, oh, I am really not well suited for this in a way that like was a little dream crushing. And there's sort of two examples. And I think it's fine because I found something that really does suit my like interests and talent. But, for example, I wanted to cover Congress. Well, Congress is a bunch of like old white dudes and the whole game is that you have to know all their faces. So when you spot one in the hallway, you can like chase them and ask them questions. And I don't know, I came in with that delusion of like, I can do that. And so I tried a little bit and I was like, actually, this is like insanely difficult and I'm getting in other people's way. And like, people aren't going to just help me because they need to get their own quotes.
Yeah. Reese Witherspoon I want to say the video went on Instagram, I think first. And she was giving advice in general about people say chase your dreams, but instead of chasing your dreams, chase what you're good at and make that your dream was essentially the gist of what she was trying to say. Did you catch that clip?
I didn't. I need to watch
Okay,
that.
I'll send it to you. But it was,
Okay.
I don't know how I felt about it when I heard it, because a part of me is like, no, you should chase your dreams. And I think make
Right.
your dreams your skill set, right? I would flip it around. But I also think that some of the most successful people, what they choose to do or what they choose to succeed in is in fact a reflection of their skill set. So it's like a chicken or egg argument. Do they make it their skill set, or was it
Totally.
inherently their skill set? I don't know.
And I would argue it probably goes a little bit both ways, that you have to do some experimentation, right?
Yeah.
Like, I really wanted to cover political campaigns, and I begged and begged, and finally in like 2019 they allowed me to go. I forget like which Democratic candidate I was going to go cover. And once I got there, I was like, oh, this sucks. Like, all you do is just like chase the candidate and see if they'll stop and answer a question. And I was like, that's really hard for me. And it's also really uninteresting.
So I mean,
it was a
honed
little
in.
bit of a dream puncture moment. Yeah, exactly. But then you figure out something else that sort of scratches a similar itch.
Yeah. I mean, I spent most of my formative years training to be a surgeon, and here I am on social media and a podcast and all sorts of other things. So I also am a firm believer.
How far did you get?
Well, I'm still a full-time practicing reconstructive surgeon, but I
Oh my God. Okay. I'll need to sidebar with you about that.
yeah. But I was actually talking to my cousin about this on the drive over. I very much believe in reinvention as well, because I love medicine. I love being a surgeon, and it's fantastic. And I think the reason I chose plastic surgery is it's probably one of the most artistic subspecialties within medicine,
Totally.
where you can be artistic and be a scientist. But I also think it wasn't enough it didn't cure my creative itch enough. So when I had the bandwidth and capacity and time, I was able to then explore these other things. But when Reese Witherspoon put out that video, I think overwhelmingly got positive response from the community, but I felt very torn about it, because I definitely am good at being a doctor, and I'm good at being a surgeon, and I got the grades, all the things that one needs to do to become a surgeon, I was inherently good at. So that was great.
Yes.
And I
Totally.
did it, and that was great. But I always wonder if completely left to my own devices, and if I had loved my parents as well, but if I maybe was born to a different family, would I have gone into journalism or I don't know, the entertainment field or something, reporting? Would I have?
God. I always think about that. My family are immigrants from Iran, and they like are very much prescribed into these, what kind of work could you get coming to America? I always think about my dad, like he works in the jewelry business in New York City. But his interests are really like, in all his free time, he's always watching the Discovery Channel and Animal Planet.
Yeah.
And I was like, if my dad grew up here, he would have been a scientist. Like, he would have been like going on safaris,
No, absolutely. And what an interesting thing to think about. And what a beautiful segue to talk about immigration, actually. But, I was born in India. So I am technically a first generation immigrant, but I moved here when I was very, very young. And my parents, of course, immigrants from India. And my dad is an engineer, also has a JD, also has an MBA, also does real estate. That man is an engineer to the core of his being. And I think no matter all of the other things he did, he is an engineer. So I think he did end up exactly where he wanted to end up.
Where he belonged.
He belonged, yeah. He did it in India, and then he did it in the United States, and now he's retired and manages all of his kids' portfolios. My mother loves medicine, excellent physician, but very much has a flair for fashion, she's this beautiful woman. She loves religion, actually. She's very, very interested in religion, her own religion, which is Hinduism, but also deeply invested in Catholicism. And so I always wonder if my mother grew up here, I don't know, where would she be? Would she be like a professor of theology somewhere? And I think it is such an interesting concept of sort of need versus want, and then also skill set versus desire, and where does that all fit in the big picture of your own delusion and manifestation? It's all very interesting, and I'm grateful that for my kids, I think the one thing I tell them is whatever you do, you just have to do it with excellence. So you're lucky. Literally whatever you want to be, you can be that, but just do it really, really, really well. Like put your heart and soul into it.
Lean in, yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so you, of course, are an extremely well-known writer and reporter on immigration for the Wall Street Journal. And I myself have been loving your pieces. I think stylistically, you very much have a delivery. How did you get to that stylistically? Is it specific to being a reporter on immigration? Have you always written like that? How did you find that? It's like perfectly punchy. I don't know how else to describe it. You read it and you're like, ooh,
thank
ooh,
you.
ooh, ooh. That's how I feel when I read your pieces.
It's probably years of training of being at the Wall Street Journal and learning to write in that style. But that's a really good question. I've thought a lot about, my job as a reporter and especially covering immigration is, it's an art to an extent, but I'm not there because people want to read beautiful sob stories. I'm there because people need good information. Immigration is something that is so often boiled down to something really basic in our culture, but the process of immigrating and immigration laws in the country are incredibly complicated. People always say that it's the second most complicated area of law after the tax code, and I think that's right.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah. And so my job is really to write in this way that it's a balancing act, and it's taken me years to work on it, where you have to be precise but also accessible. And so how do you make choices of how to describe things that are technically accurate, but also not so in the weeds that people don't understand them?
Yeah, which I think to your comment on how complex immigration law is, that's a tall order, because the average American citizen, and definitely even if you've pursued higher levels of education, it's just not a core part of your learning. You don't know these things about immigration law.
No,
and so you're so
not.
heavily dependent on what you read to then be able to sort of paint the picture of what's going on. So
right.
Paint the picture for us of what's going on. That's a big question.
That's a huge question.
Yeah. How unprecedented is what's happening right now?
That is a really good question too. In some ways, unprecedented in our modern times.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to say, we've been here before, but go ahead.
We have. I think we're hitting this point where, wow.
Sorry. For a Saturday morning, I really should have DoorDashed you like a matcha latte before we went down this road.
Trump has done this thing. It's really complicated to sum up in a sentence or two, because there's a constant back and forth in our culture where he came in with one of the most restrictive immigration policies that I've heard a modern candidate ever take on. He during the campaign was saying he wanted to deport 20 million people. And then he was sort of doing this dance around, do I like people who immigrate legally or not? And the way I would sum up how his policy is shaken out, I wrote this story when he first took office where I said, Trump, it's not that he hates people who immigrate legally too, although a lot of people who work for him, I think, are there. Yeah. It's that he is trying to take this system. He's trying to have fewer people immigrate and be choosier about who they are. He wants them to be better. And his definition of better is sometimes smarter, often richer. Do
you think race plays a card for him? Do you think he wants traditionally Caucasian appearing? Like, if someone coming from, I don't know, the UK, does he view that person differently than the person coming from Pakistan or India? Maybe Pakistan's not a great example, but India.
It's interesting. I think Trump himself is a little bit more complicated than that. He definitely has made statements that are undeniably racist, describing countries in Africa and the Caribbean as shithole countries, or, comments he made about Somalia, and basically saying their country is broken. We don't want those people. And he obviously is making those comments about countries with darker complexions that are poorer.
But I think he's more financially driven than he is racist. So I feel like he would take the richer person from India than he would the poor person from the UK. That's very simply put. Someone's going to take this clip
I totally
and
agree.
make fun of me on the internet.
It's interesting because I think a lot of his advisors are not there. I think in the last couple of years have seen this like explosion in anti-Indian racism that I frankly was not prepared for. You know,
Girl,
I'm not
same.
Indian, so I don't look out for that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's Trump, though. I think that's like parts of his movement.
Well, if you look at Laura Loomer, and this was super interesting because she has made so many, frankly, racist remarks about Indian people. And then she went to India. And my initial response,
the Dalai Lama. Did you see that?
I did, and I was so mad. Like, how does this lady get to meet the Dalai Lama? Also, who in India invited Laura Loomer? Like, she should not be allowed in the country based on what she's said. But somebody invited her, and then I still have to vet whether this was real or if it was like AI generated, but somebody posted what looked like maybe an X post of hers or a Threads post of hers saying, I went to India, I take it all back. India was amazing. I loved it. I only spent 90 days here. I want to come back and visit South India. And I was floored. I still have to vet whether this is actually true. I will. But if it is true, I mean, that's incredible that somebody was able to change Laura Loomer's mind. But also just the absolute conviction and depth of her anti-Indian racism was so extreme. And she got called out by it because that was another viral clip, was the Indian journalist who said, why are you here? You have said, and then read word for word the things that she said about Indian people.
Yes.
Right? And she's just like uncomfortably sitting there. And then she finishes her trip, meets the Dalai Lama, and then says, India's a very clean country. It's a very modern country. In this clip, she says, India's set up to be the next superpower, which I personally believe. You know what? I know we're recording. I just got to vet if this is real. I need to know if she actually, this is important.
Yeah, I was like, I don't want to weigh in just in case. I don't know
Laura
either way.
Loomer loves India post. Is it real? That's what I'm Googling.
Is it real?
Yeah, I think it's true. This is wild to me. I woke up and saw it this morning. I was like, what?
That's crazy.
No one's saying it's AI in the comments.
I love that that's the thing we have to screen for now.
I know. I was going to ask you about that too. AI in the current world of reporting and journalism. Okay, Laura Loomer's tweet. Honestly, as someone who has traveled a lot, India is the best country I have ever traveled to. It's incredible. I will have been here for 9 days when I leave, and there's still so much to see and do. My experience has been amazing, and India is portrayed negatively in the media as a place Americans should avoid. But I realize a lot of that is completely made up. The people, food, culture, and hospitality culture are just incredible. I have felt safe and comfortable the entire time that I have been here, and India will truly be the next superpower. This country has incredible potential, and you have to see it for yourself to understand, because the media only makes it out to be third world. That couldn't be further from the truth. Indian people are the nicest people I've ever met. I'm very grateful for my time in India. I've enjoyed it so much, I hope I can come back every year. Next time I want to visit South India. I've tried to do as much as possible these last 9 days, but there's still so much to do. All good things come to an end. Ready for the ending?
You wanted to see the entire country of India in 9 days?
Yeah, exactly. I love India. My misconceptions have been corrected. I have nothing but nice things to say. Emoji Indian flag.
Oh my God.
I think she got a lot of heat from that journalist. I think it definitely didn't look good. She was clearly invited to India. And at the end of the day, you cannot deny that a lot of Indian Americans hold very influential positions across major companies, right? And you also can't deny the net worth and wealth of the Indian billionaires. I mean, I feel like that's a cultural phenomenon. The Indian billionaire has taken over our feeds, whether it's their weddings or their jets or their jewelry. We're all talking about it. And I think that I wonder how much of this, obviously, whether directly paid or whether a framework to then lose some of the popularity that she had. Not that I don't know that she had that much popularity, but whoever her group was, I think some of those comments were really particularly isolating. So she's walking it back. But that was so interesting to me. That was, I still don't think Laura Loomer should be allowed in India, but if there were an outcome, I guess this is the best possible outcome. Maybe the Dalai Lama did his Dalai Lama things. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like he did something to her.
Yeah, seriously. Too bad that woman needs like a literal exorcism, but that's okay. Okay, I wanted to talk to you about Kristi Noem. Love a good conversation about Kristi Noem. She, to me, has got to be one of the most vile individuals in politics today, because the absolute inhumanity, right? You know, we talk about politics, we talk about policy, we talk about he said this, she said that, he believes this, she said that. And then you talk about actual deaths in ICE detention centers, and you talk about children being ripped away and healthcare being denied and not having access to clean water, right? We're talking about the actual violations of human rights that we're seeing. And she was at the helm of that. And famously got fired very recently. And I know that you have covered her quite a bit. And one of the pieces I really want to talk about is the piece that you put out about, it was about Kristi Noem, but it wasn't so specifically about the things that all of the Democrats love to talk about. We love to talk about the inhumanity and the deaths and the really just deeply tragic things going on. Instead, the article was really more about her efficacy as a boss, as a leader in management. And that article took off. So tell us about that.
Sure, yeah. I would say one of the things that I think about a lot as a reporter covering this area, covering immigration, covering the Trump administration is all that stuff you mentioned, undoubtedly bad, unprecedented numbers of deaths in ICE detention, some unjust and deportations, people being deported by accident because there are so many.
Oh my.
Is that Kristi Noem, or is that going to be anyone that they install, because there's so much pressure on this area to sort of go big? So it's interesting that you asked this question, because my job is to cover the Department of Homeland Security. And for almost a year, I've been hearing from people who work there all these like horror stories about Kristi Noem. But these people, people who work at DHS, who work at ICE, they're, don't tend to be like bleeding heart liberals. They believe in immigration enforcement. And what they had to say about her was kind of like, she's getting in the way of our mission. And some of it was objectively bad. Misuse of taxpayer dollars, just absurd stuff. And the most, I think that the anecdote that was like most emblematic of anything that she's done was the story we heard where she took a trip. She flies a Coast Guard plane because the Coast Guard is under DHS. And there was a mechanical issue with her plane, so they had to switch planes at the last minute. She gets on the new plane, realizes her blanket hadn't been moved from one plane to another. And so she flies into a
Kristi, a
range.
grown adult, doesn't have her blanket. I wonder how she feels about all the children who are without their blankets and stuffies. Anyways, go ahead.
Flies into a rage. Her top advisor, who we've also reported she's in a relationship with, Corey Lewandowski, goes and berates the pilot mid-flight, fires the pilot for misplacing her blanket. And then once they land, they realize, oh shit, we have no way to get home. So they have to reinstate the pilot to fly them home.
What I love about this is that we're seeing more and more this push to, we can't get the MAGA Republicans to think like the bleeding liberals, to have a heart. They clearly, whatever they've decided their value system is, allows for these inhumane things to happen in ICE detention centers, right? So continuing to tell them about it doesn't seem to help, because they've already decided that in their moral compass, whatever allowances are necessary to allow this to happen, they've already made peace with it. So what we then do is get at what they actually are bothered by, which is getting in the way of their mission, misuse of money, not being an effective, leader or manager in this position. And that is what ends up getting her fired. It was the misuse of taxpayer dollars for an ad. It was the impetus to then have Trump let her go, despite all these other things. And that's what I think is so magnificent about what you wrote, and sort of, I think, the cultural implications of that is setting this stage for, this is, you can hate her for all the inhumane things that have happened under her watch, but actually, she's also just on paper bad at her job. She's not doing her job properly. And so then the article takes off. Everyone's quoting it. Everyone's reposting it. And then boom, you have that congressional hearing where she's getting questioned by her own people about the misuse of taxpayer dollars. Next thing you know, she's let go.
Right.
I think
it was
that's
a crazy few weeks.
Crazy few weeks, but kudos to you, because I think one of the most impressive parts of a good, or qualities of a good reporter or in journalism, is This is why I couldn't do it, because I'm not impartial. I'm like a bleeding liberal, and I can't take a step back and take a look at these things because I am so bothered by everything else. But to be able to have the interest to know that there's this whole other side of the story that people aren't really talking about, and then to talk about it, and you were spot on, you were correct, because it did take off for those reasons, and then to see what followed, I think it was just like poetic justice.
Thank you.
I have a carpool set up for my kids to get to school. And every once in a while, I drive the kids to school in the morning. And I have an enterprising young 10-year-old named Akshay that I have the pleasure of driving to school. And he's so well read. He's so interested in current events. And he's a big fan of yours. And so we were talking politics and current affairs. And I was telling him that I had, the honor of speaking with you and interviewing you for the podcast. And he had some questions for you. So I'm gonna pop up those videos here.
This is so cute. Thank you.
It's so cute, so that the viewers can see them. But I'll play the video for you.
Hi, I'm Akshay. I'm a 5th grader who loves journalism. I was wondering,
I love this kid.
As a respected and experienced writer for major news outlets, what's some advice you would give aspiring journalists about how to investigate topics correctly?
So cute. Oh my God. I'm obsessed with this kid.
Me too.
Hi, Akshay. If you are an aspiring journalist, the best advice I have is to just start doing journalism. Start writing things, maybe, write some email dispatches to your friends and family, start a local newsletter about what's going on in your neighborhood. When you get to middle school and high school, write for your middle school paper, write for your high school paper, because there's nothing that teaches you how to do journalism except actually doing it. And follow things that you're interested in. What's going on in the community around me? Go ask questions. And I think the best journalism is not the one where people already come in with a viewpoint, but, think about things that you're curious about and go ask questions and see, if someone sort of confirms what you're thinking already or makes it more complicated.
I love that. And then there was one more question that he had that I sent you as well.
I was wondering, when you took a trip to the ICE detainment facility in El Salvador, what were some things that you observed? How does that compare to any ICE detainment facilities in America?
Wow. What a good question.
Yeah.
So Akshay is asking about a trip I took last March, actually with Kristi Noem, where I visited the sort of notorious prison in El Salvador called Secot, where we sent about 200 immigrants. We took them out of their regular immigration proceedings and flew them to El Salvador. And it was a wild experience. I mean, walking around there, first of all, it was definitely the biggest facility I've ever been to. I think the whole thing holds 15,000 people. I don't think it's full. It felt like, I've visited prisons in America before, and they're pretty grim, dank places. What was crazy about this prison was that it was just built a few years ago, and you could really feel it. It was brand new. It didn't smell despite all the people there. It sort of felt hot, but in this way that was almost intentional. I kind of wondered if they were pumping hot air in.
Oh my gosh.
I was just I don't know how to describe it other than to say it almost felt like this techno future prison. So it was a bizarre experience being there. It felt really stark. You could tell that they were psychologically probably torturing the people who were there. I mean, they had these bunk beds that were stacked right next to each other and maybe 4 high, these metal bunk beds where people were kept most of the time on their beds. There are all these allegations of physical abuse. But the thing I would emphasize is we sent people there without any kind of trial. And also in immigration, one thing that even Republicans love to say is that deportation is not technically supposed to be a punishment. It's supposed to be a corrective action if you're here illegally, but you're not in prison, right? You're just being taken out of the country, technically speaking. So to say that we deported people into a prison is well, what did they do to deserve that? These people were not criminals per se. Not
well,
proven.
and that's the thing is it's unproven. They haven't had trial, so therefore we're just punishing them without any exploration of whatever the accusations are being made by people who say, oh, we're only deporting criminals.
Totally. Well, and I mean, in the U.S., we have something in the Constitution that protects against cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah.
And even if people did, commit crimes in the U.S., our prison system has, a system of ethics. We don't torture people in our prisons. And so, is that a violation of our laws to take these people and send them to this foreign prison where they are being tortured?
There's no due process. They're not provided trial. And I get, this is what I want to end on with you, is there's so much, the counter arguments are so frustrating for me because people will say things like, well, they're not U.S. citizens, they don't have rights. That's actually not true. There are many rights that people have without being a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil. And that drives me crazy when people say that because it's just factually untrue, yet it is perpetuated again by so many people.
It's tough, right? Especially as a reporter covering this stuff. Like, these are maybe, some of them at least are not the most sympathetic characters. They're sort of tattooed, immigrants. Maybe they have some gang affiliation. It's not totally clear. And people are like, okay, why are we spending so much time caring about these people and not caring enough about Americans who, can't afford to put food on the table? And it's a fair question. Like, why do I spend so much time reporting on these people? Partially because it's my job. But to me, it's like the way that we treat immigrants is sort of like a bellwether for how we might treat other people too. We often test out new punishments on foreigners first. And I think, when this government potentially violates court orders, and in that case, there's a very famous, a judge said, you are not allowed to send that plane to El Salvador, turn it around, and they didn't listen. It's like, what else?
What else are they going to choose to ignore, right? And how eerily familiar does this sound to things that have happened, in world history from the past? Okay, and another question I want to ask you, another constant counter argument I get is, well, Obama deported a bunch of people. He's actually deported even more people than Trump. And I know what I have as my sort of rote response to that, but I would love to hear what your response to that would be as an expert.
Yeah, Obama actually did deport a lot of people. His high watermark was, I think, in 2013, he deported about 430,000 people. First of all, that's higher than any year in Trump won. It's much higher than any year under Biden. But it's lower than this past year. I mean, Trump just deported, roughly speaking, 500,000 people. And I think people are feeling that, right? People are noticing that people in their communities are being deported. One thing that Obama did that was controversial in its own way at the time is that he really, really leaned on jails and prisons to turn people over, sometimes mid-sentence, sometimes before they were even sentenced, people who were picked up sometimes on relatively minor, traffic violations and sent to jail. Those people would be turned over to ICE and quickly deported. And people had a huge problem with that because it was, in a similar way, like a violation of due process. Like, did these people actually, besides being in the country illegally, did these people sort of do something that in the minds of maybe more liberal-minded Americans, made them deserve to be deported? But Trump hasn't done that as much. I mean, he's been really out there arresting people in communities, which is why I think people are feeling it even more. Maybe it's a slightly higher number of total deportations than under Obama, but people are feeling it more because it's more people that they know and that they've seen get arrested.
Yeah. I mean, I think my answer to people is always, it's not just the end result. You have to look at the execution of the plan, right? So if Obama, as those in defense of Obama's immigration policies say, well, he really did what he could do to target people with a criminal record, right? And that's what he focused on and who he was deporting. You can't really say that accurately for the Trump administration and who they're choosing to deport for the exact reasons that you said, but only it's worth discussing because I think it's actually something, immigration policy is controversial and clearly we haven't gotten it right and we need to figure it out. And I think there are people on both sides that can agree with that. But the way we have crossed that conversation into what is happening now, which in my opinion, frankly, qualifies as human rights violations, I think is where, I don't know, you lost me. I am, it's going to be hard, I think, to really come back from this. And I think in the past when we've seen countries, whether it was the United States or other countries, villainize immigrants in this way, it had a very profoundly negative impact on the growth of science, technology, culture, arts, and things that are maybe more universally relatable, like the cost of groceries.
Totally. I think all of those things are connected to immigration.
One last question I want to leave you with. I, as a consumer of news, from very reputable sources, but also, I hate to admit it, but I'm also the one doom scrolling and I'll see a clip and I'll repost it because right. And so a lot of these will talk about really notably inhumane conditions, specifically at the Dilley ICE Detention Center in Texas. Moldy food, worms, parasites, no access to clean water, charging $39 per day for access to clean water, people who are sick, dying because these illnesses are going ignored. How much of that do you feel is sensationalist journalism or cherry picking versus an accurate representation of what we're seeing in these detention centers?
Somehow, I think it's a little bit of both. ICE detention is not a fun place to be. And from all accounts, from everyone I've spoken to, the food is never good. It's, it's disgusting. It's not healthy. They also serve it at weird times. The place feels dirty. They cram people in there. And I think the thinking is like, why invest so much? Because people aren't going to live here. Like, our goal is to just deport them as quickly as possible. But yeah, I think what people are reporting is definitely accurate. It's, the government doesn't, it's not a high priority for them to provide really good conditions for people. And this is the result. And then they hire these private contractors who are trying to just sort of do this as cheaply as possible. And that's how you get moldy food, no laundry, no clean water, etc.
If I had to make an ending statement on all of this, it has been so difficult to watch as someone who is an immigrant. It has been incredibly difficult to watch people in my community affected by this. And what I do hope, to quote you, you said, the universe tends to bend in the direction of justice over time. I do hope to see that, and I will be curious to see what the reparation for this looks like. Where does the pendulum then swing to see that it has gone so far in this direction now? I can't wait to see what the next 10 years, 20 years holds for the United States.
Me too.
Well, thank you, Michelle, so much for joining us on Inside Thoughts Out Loud. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Of course. Thank you.
This was awesome.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you for asking.
After having this chat with Michelle, I think one of the most impressive things that landed with me is her ability to approach these topics as impartial as possible. I think her being blind is actually a gift in this capacity. She's really able to use all of her senses in taking in a place that she visits or in conversations with people that she may interview or sources. And I think that is such a gift, especially in today's world when it comes to journalism and reporting. I think another remarkable thing about Michelle is the confidence with which she navigates the world and her job. And I think that's something that all of us can learn from. I truly believe that diversity and inclusivity, these are not terms that we just have to check a box in. I really believe that these are actionable items that will allow us to be the best of who we are by working with people with different perspectives, different abilities. And I hope that this episode with Michelle inspired you today.